Hello and welcome to another screencast, this time in fitness tests. Just a reminder, obviously the yellow text boxes are tasks for students, the green text boxes are the note-taking sections for students, the blue text boxes are differentiation tasks, and the red text boxes are for the teachers' teaching and learning strategies and ideas. So the syllabus for this particular topic asks students to recognise the reasons for and the limitations of fitness tests. So you need to know the advantages and disadvantages of fitness testing in sports. You also need to know about the procedures, the protocols of each fitness test, and ultimately you need to be able to apply these fitness tests to the various fitness components. And ultimately, from your knowledge then, you'll be able to kind of decide which tests are most relevant for which sports. So we've got lots of content to get through, so let's get cracking. So first, just quick question for you. It's not related to sport as such, but it's getting you thinking about this topic now. Just pause the video, see if you can answer this question. Tests should be scrapped across education. Discuss. Okay, so hopefully you've answered that question. I think many of you probably would say yes, you want tests to be scrapped, probably from a convenience point of view more than anything else. But interestingly enough, did you write any reasons as to why tests shouldn't be scrapped? So, think about the purpose of a test. The purpose of a test is to know where we are, and obviously, ultimately, hopefully, to motivate us to know where we want to go. So we recognise, obviously, maybe our limitations, we recognise our areas of weakness, and so on. So, and that's kind of links in nicely to the next task. So try and do the same now and just think about, why do we fitness test? Why do we actually test our athletes in regards to their fitness? So pause the video now and try and answer this. Okay, so hopefully you've answered that question. You recognise obviously the importance for us as coaches, teachers and so on to identify and test our athletes, is because ultimately we need to know where they are in regards to their fitness. Are they able to meet the demands of the environment? Are they able to cope? And if not, where are the limitations? What can we do to improve them? At the end of the day, each and every athlete is looking for those marginal gains, those 1% gains, in order to achieve and strive to better performance. So ultimately we test for those specific reasons. Okay, so why do we carry out tests? So ultimately, these are some of the things that I've just spoken about. Okay, so we obviously start to show the level of fitness that we're currently at. It helps us inform us in regards to our training requirements. We're able to identify strengths and weaknesses, and we can obviously gauge sort of how the training program is, how successful it is based on those fitness test measurements. And we can test them against the norms, and we'll be looking in a later screencast about norm data and how we interpret it that. And we can also set goals. It can motivate us, and it can provide us with a specific training program. So again, there's some challenge tasks there for you. I've differentiated it, so it's in the blue text box now, but again, pause the video and see if you can answer these. Okay, and then let's move on. So let's now think about the drawbacks of fitness testing. So ultimately, what are the negatives of fitness testing? So just pause your video here. Okay, let's go through some of your answers to see whether you were able to answer that question correctly. So tests, at times, fitness tests might not be sport specific. So some of the movements in sport might not relate to the specific tests, and they don't replicate maybe the competitive conditions that sport is required to be played in. Ultimately, there's a questionable kind of reliability element to some of these tests. So ultimately, they might not give accurate scores, and we're going to look at those key terms, validity and reliability, a little bit later in a different podcast. So, and moving on from here, obviously, we need to make sure that we set out the correct procedures, the correct protocols, because ultimately the test may be inaccurate if we didn't. And final point, in terms of a mental point of view, it can obviously decrease the confidence and the self-esteem of the individual. Again, sort of just pause your video here and just see if you can answer these questions. Okay, so I think the key point to mention about this particular sort of topic is go onto YouTube, go onto some of the apps on the Apple Store or the Android Store, and look to actually watch some of these videos, because I'm going to go through them now, and I'm going to try and whiz through them because there's quite a lot of them, but ultimately if you watch them you'll get a better gauge on them as well. Okay, so the first one is the Illinois agility test. So ultimately you can see here on the diagram on the right hand side is how you would set this up. But ultimately this is a test for agility. So how quickly we can move with control and at speed and with coordination. And ultimately we'll set this up with the cones the way that they're laid out. And you can see they're arranged 10 meters by 5 meters. Okay, and there's four cones in the middle. And ultimately we start face down on the floor like in a press up position. And then on the whistle, or when we get shouted go, we run as quickly as possible in the direction of the dotted line. Okay, so that is that particular test, and it's obviously recorded in seconds, and then ultimately we'll compare it to the averages of our norm data. The next test is the standing stork test. So you can see here the diagram kind of really shows you what's going on in the standing stork test, but these are some of the key points that you need to make yourself aware of. This is obviously a time-based test. We need to make sure we position our hands on our hips and one of our legs sort of on the inside of our standing knee, and then we've got to make sure that we plant our foot on the floor, but then we raise it so we're on the ball of our foot. Okay, so we're not flat-footed as we do this test, and as soon as our heel of our standing foot falls to the floor, or if we bounce around, okay, then we would stop the test at this particular point. Obviously recorded, as I said, in minutes and seconds, depending on how long you stay on the ball of your foot. All right, so let's move on to the multi-stage fitness test. Again, here, this is kind of measured out in 20 meters. What happens here is it's a set of beeps in essence, okay, and you start the test, okay, with the sound of the first bleep, and obviously as you go through the stages, as you go through the different sets of these stages here, okay, the bleeps will get shorter, okay, in time. So initially they'll start quite far apart, where you can probably walk or speed walk from one end of the gym to the other, okay, but ultimately as you go through the phases, okay, those bleeps will get shorter. Okay, so obviously this is a test for endurance. Okay, let's move on to coordination. So coordination is the wall toss test. So again, here you can see the individual has the ball in her right hand, and she'll throw it against the wall, and then she'll catch it with her left hand. That would count as 1. Okay, and you basically need to see how many you can do here within 30 seconds. Okay, so she throws it with her right hand, catch it with her left, she'll then throw it with her left and catch it with her right. So you've got to make sure that you throw and you catch with alternating hands here. Okay, and ultimately you should be about 2 meters from the wall as you do this. Okay, flexibility next. Okay, this is sit and reach test. Ultimately you can see here that basically you plant the feet underneath the bench if you're using a bench, or the slider if you're using the slider, and obviously we'll reach forward. Okay, we're trying to reach past where our feet are, okay, and that will give us a positive score. If we can't reach our feet, then we'll get a negative score. If we can reach to the point of our toes, then ultimately we should score a neutral score in essence. Okay, again, this is a recording that's taken, obviously measuring that range of movement available at the specific joints. All right, we move on to the sit up bleep test. So in essence, this is very similar to the multi-stage fitness test, but we're basically just doing this with sit-ups. In essence, every time there's a bleep, okay, the candidate will come up into the sit-up position, okay, and she hears the bleep or he hears the bleep again, okay, and then we come back down, and ultimately as time goes on, those bleeps will get progressively quicker. Okay, so ultimately the score will be achieved of when the candidate can't do any more. Move on to the power test, power strength test, and we will record this as the sergeant jump. Okay, so ultimately the candidate will just kind of stand against the wall and place their hand up without jumping initially. They'll mark a point there, okay, and with some of a pen or chalk, and that will be point 0, and then from there they'll sort of crouch down into a squat position and jump as high as they can and tap the wall, and ultimately that measurement will be taken from the first point, the 0 point, to where they then tap the wall to see how high they've jumped in centimeters. All right, let's move on to reaction time, the ruler drop test. So again, here you can see you need someone else to hold the ruler out for you, like a 30 centimeter ruler, okay, and yourself, you're going to have your index finger and your thumb, okay, at the bottom of the ruler, okay, sort of just apart so that the ruler can fit in between your hands, and at any point your partner will drop the ruler, okay, and you need to react by obviously stopping that ruler from hitting the floor, okay, and then you'll obviously measure yourself from the 0 point of the ruler to where you've stopped and you've caught it, okay. So ultimately, obviously, the lower the number here in terms of centimeters, the quicker your reaction, okay. All right, let's move on to the 1 rep max test. So here, ultimately, you're using some sort of bench press, or it could be a leg press, and ultimately you are seeing how much you can lift in 1 repetition. Okay, so if you can lift a weight, then wait for a couple of minutes so that you can rest and recover. Your muscles don't get too fatigued, so it doesn't skew this test. It doesn't mess up this test. And after a couple of minutes, again, increase the weight a little bit. Okay, and then see if you can lift the next weight. Always useful to have a spotter here, especially if you're using a bench press like this, so they can help you in case you can't lift up that weight. Okay, but ultimately you're trying to find out your 1 rep maximum, your 100% working, okay, where you can only lift it once and you wouldn't be able to lift it again. Okay, so let's move on to the hand grip dynamometer test. Okay, so here obviously we've got you can see the dynamometer to the right hand side, the individual. Okay, she's got her arm bent there, but actually she should have her arm straight out in front of her, straight. Okay, and ultimately we're squeezing for about 5-6 seconds. She can repeat this about 3 times, and however hard she squeezes, okay, the hand grip dynamometer, then basically it will give a reading. Okay, so she has 3 attempts, and she can obviously record her best attempt on this. We then move on to the speed test. So this is the 30-meter sprint test. In essence, basically the candidate, the runner here, will start off on a specific line, okay, and all they're doing really is running straight forward in 30 meters. Okay, so ultimately we are timing that using a stopwatch, obviously, and they need to obviously sprint from their start position for 30 meters. Okay, and we'll measure their time based on how quickly they've got from point A to point B. Okay, so I mean they're all the fitness protocols. You can go back and look through them in a bit more detail and whatever else. But now, in terms of a challenge, I want you to think of these 6 key sports. Okay, just pause your video here. Identify which fitness components are the most suitable for each athlete. So 2 or 3 key fitness components, and therefore which fitness tests would be most suitable for these specific athletes. Okay, so you're now applying AO1, okay, into AO2 with the specific sporting examples. And then finally, for teachers, if we're looking at the teaching and learning strategies here, I think in terms of this particular topic, it's really important that you get the students engaged with actually doing some practical lessons on this. So if you've got access to a gym or to the hall during your theory lesson, then try and get in there as much as possible. You can do some of those tests in class, I guess, if you think of the ruler drop test, but obviously you just need to make sure you've got the equipment to do that. And then ultimately, I would, with my classes, I would normally try and do like an Ironman challenge or challenge the class, whereby you collect the scores of the different tests that they've done. So they like the competitive element, and then you can record those scores, and you can start to analyze that data, and that really links in nicely to the next topic, where it looks at data analysis. We're looking at qualitative and quantitative data, and we're looking then and comparing the scores to sort of norms and normative data. So real kind of crossover links here, where you can smoothly transition from the fitness test element to the data analysis. Okay, so best of luck there, guys. I know that was quite a lot of information. to take down, but like I said, make sure you pause the video at any point, you go back, you rewind, you go have a look at it again, okay, and obviously look at some YouTube clips to see some of those fitness tests in action. Good luck.